Right. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you all back. Day 3, our final day of this online PI16 OSS community meeting. I'm very much looking forward to face-to-face convenings next year, fingers crossed. That way we can all see your smiling faces and have chats during coffee breaks and share more ideas, have more time together. But while we're here this morning or afternoon, depending on which side of the world you are, we want to take some time and really ask you to give of yourself and your knowledge and your time into our sessions today. Our sessions today focus primarily on the roadmap. And we'll start off with a few presentations, but then we'll later go into breakouts where we would like your feedback on what you think needs to be developed or what we need to focus on in this coming PI. And we have a number of roadmap presentations to begin with this morning. I'll pass it over to Leslie-Ann to coordinate the start for us. Leslie-Ann?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to briefly just set the scene on today with just a framework. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully that is up. You can see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So this is just a reminder of what we set up in our January community event as our goal for the year, as our big, hairy, audacious goals for the year. We really want to focus on traction on the ground and community sustainability. And given I've got you guys, and sometimes people ask, how is it going? This is a high level view that I showed you last time in July. And with the yellow markers, there's been a little bit of movement in the last quarter that you might as a community want to be aware of. We had a massive win this quarter. Myanmar Microfinance Institution renamed their product WinPay, and they went live. They've done their first settlement. They've had their first real money transactions, and they are so busy that they actually haven't been able to come this week to get involved in the community. And rightly so, we want to make sure that things are happening in the ground, and we do work with them in between community events now. There was also a public announcement this quarter from Philippines. RCBC is the name of so if you Google RCBC and Philippines in motorsports, you'll actually find a few articles where there was a public signing of an intention to use Modulip to connect rural MFIs together. You saw our presentation from Microsoft, and it's such a good move forward for us this quarter. I'm really excited about it. And we've also had, I'm calling them Blue Bank Cyber, are working with an initiative as well, which is really exciting to see that's moved forward into the sandbox phase. We've had a little bit of movement around the ACH space, and a big change, and I'm not sure if they're here today, but they've been around during the week. There's a new organization called Africanenda. They're a ground partner organization, and my goodness, in COVID times, do we need ground partners when it comes to advocacy and pilots and real world engagement. So I'd encourage you to look up Africanenda on their website. Hopefully we'll get them to actually talk to the community at some point about what they're up to. They're actively helping us in our Rwanda pilot already. And that's quite exciting to see the difference that it makes to have someone who can actually be on the ground. So that's a very whirlwind tour of the kind of stuff that's been happening this quarter in the kind of deployments traction space. The two big questions that I am always asking myself: how do we get traction in any one market, and how do we do this in a repeatable way? This is the slide I presented last time. I'm not going to go through it again, but it's still very much the focus of what's going on. And our targets for 2021, we proposed these back in January. They're exactly the kind of work we've been doing this year. We've been removing friction in adoption with all the various things that we've been doing around Payment Manager now is open sourced, and we are looking at cost reduction measures. We helped Rwanda with their sandbox and the IAC contribution as a consequence. And we also have Finance Portal 2.0 as a way for us to actually show some business processes in action, and part of our value prop around why do we want straight through processing, which is really exciting to see. The cost reduction, I'm very excited about the Microsoft initiative to see how that might lead to a reduced friction in that funnel and cost reduction to get started. But obviously we're looking at lots of things through the reference architecture workstream and the proposal around 2.0 and things. We are looking very much at features around adopter traction. That's why we talked about the work stream around FitSoWorks and Moali, and hopefully we'll look from tips in Rwanda to that table sooner than later. And ready for production. We all know the importance of the reference architecture work. That secure, performant at scale, cost-effective, modular, extensible, resilient, testable, and easy to deploy and operate is at the foundation of our work at the DA and in the reference architecture and many of the work streams. So we are doing the right things this year to help us move forwards. So at Town Hall, we've been using this as a framework for our work heavily. And you can kind of see how the work streams and the product lenses kind of fit together in this. We have work in our core clearing system, in the hub itself, across 4 different areas. And you'll see roadmap presentations from folk in that area today. Primarily first, we'll do the reference architecture, the business process framework work, the ISO 222 messages, things like that. Then we've had various initiatives where we look at use case propositions and extensions. And overlay services, the 3PPI is a big part of that. In the past, we talked a little bit merchants. We haven't had the ability to get merchants workstream leads at the table today, but I'll kind of stand in for them as a proxy. I've got a goal board already, you'll have seen in the Slack channel. And Michael will cover the FX and cross-network side of things. Then in our adjacent tools and marketplace side of the world, Sam will talk to us about the hosted DFSP support tools around TCK, SDK, connection managers, payment managers, all those kind of things that are vital to us getting the friction removed from getting networks created. The Actio team may well want to run some kind of initiative around getting their data feeds right. And we're not working at the moment on new marketplace tools until we get some of our basics in play, but they're there in our framework. And then we know that we're doing a lot of pre-sales consideration work. You've heard a lot this week about tools to grow community and tools to grow awareness of what is Modulip. And so we have our improved front of house initiative around the sandbox and the documentation. We have our detailed documentation from new adopters, the work that's been done with Udwak and Kim and the community team. And we obviously have our training program as well. Now, not every work stream that is active is going to do a breakout today, but they are all active. And the breakouts are a good way for us to get collaboration going in the open and to get some community building and some team building work going today. So without further ado, we have presentations from some of these teams. And I just say, as normal, guys, we work through it in the order that we normally do at Town Hall, where we use a similar framework. So Pedro, do you want to go first?
Hi, Leslie-Ann. Thank you. Yes. Let me start by sharing my screen. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so and this is exactly the same slide as before. Unfortunately, we didn't get the chance that we wanted to start building towards that next generation platform, and for which the first milestone was that alpha release. We focused instead on the documentation, making sure that it was published and in due process as we presented the other day. So what we have in terms of goals for PI 16 is still the same. We want to get started building the foundation for the next generation platform, the one that can enable the marketplace. We know we have the design, we have a plan, we know exactly what we need to do, and we know the resources that we need. So the first key epic, or the key objective that we want to achieve, is to deliver the initial versions of the foundational cross-cutting concerns. So that's going to be security, auditing, platform configuration. So some of those things that are cross-cutting in the sense that we're not delivering specific functionality of the switch, we're delivering supporting functionality that needs to be there for the switch to operate. And mind you, this is the next generation or next version shape of it according to what we have designed with the reference architecture team. So then we will deliver the initial versions of the main bounded context, and these are the transfers, the accounts and balances, the interop, the participants, the quoting, lookup, settlements, and notifications. This is the essential functionality of the switch. And these two things will make what we call the alpha release. The alpha release is just releasing the new foundation for the next version in a way that the structure works, the interfaces between the parts work, and that we have the happy path use cases all working. So essentially what we're saying is that this is not feature complete, this is not software, this is not a switch that anyone can deploy. This is the switch, this is the code version that any developer can pick up if they want to start building tools, solutions, retrofitting whatever existing implementation to the new structure. They can then use the alpha release for that, because the alpha release will have all of the interfaces implemented. So those are the two main objectives regarding the alpha release of V2. There's a third objective that we have, which is the, as Michael Richards presented, the FX bounded context. We need to design it. We need to not only understand exactly what the problem is, which we have a fairly good idea about, but we need to document that process as we did for everything else as part of the reference architecture. So we need to take our time and have sessions that define exactly what is the problem with the Forex, exactly how does that fit in terms of a solution that aligns with the rest of the reference architecture, and what is technically a possible implementation architecture that we can put on the map for the future. So that's objective number 3. Objective number 4 is, Sam was suggesting that at the end of this PI, if we get the chance to get started with this development, it would be a great idea to do a final push at the end of the PI, so that we can show a bit more and we can create a bit more excitement about what this is, because the reality is that this is work that needs to be done, but it's not something that is visible. It's not something that is terribly exciting. The end goal is the exciting thing. So the suggestion was, why don't we run a hackathon at the end of PI 16, just before our next convening, to create a bit of awareness about and excitement about what this new version can unlock. So that's number 4. And number 5 is, obviously, at the end of this PI, we will need to present a plan for what's next. And we know that what's next after the alpha version, this release, this technical release for developers, we're going to start focusing on putting the meat on the skeleton and basically starting to deliver the rest of the functionality. So the beta release for PI 17, hopefully, is now that we have a structure, now we're going to put the rest of the software in place. It's no longer just happy path cases, use cases. It's just basically continue building the actual functionality, because the structure is, the majority of the structure is there. So that's what we're set out to do and to deliver for the next PI. In terms of what is important, what can we complete? This is always obviously depending on resources, as you know, and this is as mentioned in the first session that we had when we presented the work that the reference architecture team has been doing so far. This first alpha release is something that has to be done. It needs resources. It's not visible. It's not something that is usable by any implementer or any adopter in its form when we release it. So the roadmap is just getting started. We really need to get started, because this is a long-term objective. It pays out, but we unfortunately need to do the work. So not doing it, not doing as I think it was Miller yesterday, and rightly so, saying, well, doing something has a cost. Not doing something also has a cost. Not doing this is not making a decision when I think pretty much everyone is now in tune that we need to get started with the next generation. We need to have a plan for the future generation platform while we keep iterating the current one. We need to get started. So the consequence of not doing this is that nothing bad will happen. It's just that the good thing will not happen, or at least not in the time frame that we expected. So we really need to get started. Risks and issues, as always, this is something that requires dedication. This is not a small thing to do. There's a minimum, which is what we're calling the alpha release. There's a minimum to add value. This is, in this case, is value for developers to start working with the new structure, but it's still value, it's tangible value that we can deliver. Without delivering that amount of code, that amount of structure, the value is simply not going to be there. So ideally, we need dedicated resources to get this done as soon as possible. Now, how do we define success? Well, we define success by delivering this. We have 5 key objectives. We want to deliver those, obviously, and that's how we define success. If we align the deliveries in time, then that's when the resources will come into play. So this resource plan, 6 dedicated developers, was the one that we had since last PI. This is what we think is required to fully deliver the alpha release in one PI. And this is the initial objective. The second set of resources, the minimum of 6 or of 4 dedicated developers, that was the ask to deliver the value, even if we would not be able to deliver that in one PI, in one single PI, but recognizing that this is something that just needs to get started. We were saying, well, the minimum team is 4 dedicated developers. I think that the mood of the team right now is we didn't get the resources that we want. So whatever resources we can get, we will make do. We will just have to get started. Right now, an update, it looks like we might have the equivalent of 2 full-time resources if some of the things that are being confirmed in recent weeks get confirmed about resource availability and dedication. So that means that instead of having 6 as optimum or 4 as minimum, we will get 2, and that's great. If we get that confirmed, that's going to be great. Hopefully by the end of PI 16, we have something very interesting to show, even if it's not the whole thing. Anyway, we're excited to get started. So that's the update from the reference architecture team.
Sounds really good, Pedro. So you are running a breakout. There's obviously lots of parallel breakouts today across various topics. This work will happen regardless about who is in the actual breakout doing planning today. And I can see on there actually that you've mentioned support the EFX team with bounded context design work. So I'm guessing that there'll be a little bit of conflict between going to Michael's session to learn about what he's thinking about FX and different things. So the reason for me saying that is that the breakouts are there as a facility today. They don't indicate that this session will not happen, that the work will not happen just because the breakout didn't happen necessarily the way that it might do, because I know that there's various sessions where we've got conflict of resource going on today.
Yes.
Good.
And the point here is just to say that the reference architecture team is going to be fully involved in helping with the design of the FX. Probably not all of the details, but as we did for everything else, it is super important that whenever we have more knowledge about the FX, it's included as part of the reference architecture. That is the way of working of the reference architecture. It needs to constantly be up to date so that we know that the future vision is valid, is being updated, right. It's being fed from reality and not just a dream.
So at the very end, what we might even do, for example, is split reference architecture into our business as usual processes as stuff that we do via our DA work, and then V2 build as something separate to that, where there's resources from DA and reference architecture team always available to all work streams, to make sure that we've got that as part of the funnel of how we do our work. Which is really good.
That's a very good point, actually. That split is an interesting one and an important one, because the reference architecture, as mentioned in our presentation, it has value on its own, and we have it. The version 2 build is something that is decoupled from the reference architecture. So those are two different things. The reality is that the version 2 that we want to get started building, obviously, is incorporating all of the learnings and all of the advice from the reference architecture. But those two things are separate things. So I fully agree with you. We need a team to get started in the V2 build, and we need to incorporate the spirit of having and maintaining a reference architecture as part of day-to-day architecture.
Sounds awesome. I'm really supportive of that. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
Shut up. I promise I'll shut up. I've been I was a bit neglecting the last session. I really want to thank the team that has been working in this, because we haven't gotten the dedication that we wanted, but still we had a lot of people participate. Well, not a lot of people, but a few good people putting a lot of effort into this. Even without the resource allocation, people have been committed to this, and I think that we're not giving up on it. So I wanted to thank the team for the amazing effort that was done.
I actually thank all of you guys. As workstream leads, I said yesterday, unsung heroes. There's a lot of work by volunteering, contributing to be a workstream lead. So thank you also, Pedro, for your work in getting people kind of motivated around this work.
I don't give up.
Okay, so is Paul around from the business process side of things? Are we doing a breakout room on business process? Yes, we are. There we go.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm around. Let me just share my screen. That's the one. So what's the BizOps framework or work stream all about? It's really about setting up a hub and running a merge loop hub is hard, and it's really about trying to make that easier. So there's lots of parts to this. There's the documentation part, and the documentation part is all about defining processes, sharing ideas of business processes that work and make it more efficient in the hub. And I think in the next PI, that's a big opportunity to collaborate on some of those processes and sort of enrich the documentation that we've got there in place as the means of sharing ideas on what those processes can be. Essentially, that's what we're building, is business processes for a hub to make it easier and quicker to implement a hub and do it in a safe, reliable, best practice method. Obviously, there's a technical aspect to that as well, which is the framework itself, and there comes lots of different parts to it. In this view at the moment, I'm showing 3 of them, but there's definitely a lot more. The initial one, the RBAC security, is really critical at this point because it's a bit of a gap. We do have RBAC security, but not to the extent that we would like it to be. But this framework's built up an RBAC, sort of production grade RBAC solution that we hope to complete and get live in the next PI and get someone using it. So that's one of the objectives I would like to see. And then of course we've got the back-end UI to make it easier to drill down and access the data, and sort of make that level of operations easier and more accessible. And then reporting bound context obviously is an important way of accessing some of the reporting information. In terms of what I think we should get out of the next in the next PI, for me, it's getting it into production. That's what I would love to see. and the parts that need to be completed as far as that goes is the ISC, or getting that that deployment, because the complication in getting these systems together is getting a good implementation, is getting them configured correctly and easily, and it can be very time consuming. If you've got an ISC, it all set up in the ISC, that obviously simplifies that whole process and initiative. And then we've got this other open source product, the Financial Portal version 2, and sort of leveraging that to try and get the business ops framework into production seems to make a lot of sense. So completing those two efforts seem important to me. And then what I would love to see is more sort of community collaboration on this effort, you know. Collaboration on the documentation and the processes, sharing ideas of what works. For example, there's a dispute resolution process that Mawali uses that might make sense for ThyssenWorks, you know, and if that could be documented in sort of a general way, that becomes then a resource in the community that can leverage off that. And if there's a back-end system that can help support that, and that we can build into the framework, then fantastic. It doesn't have to be, obviously, it could just be a use of an existing software, but having that business process documented is a way of collaborating. And then it would be lovely to be able to get some micro front ends with corresponding back end operational sort of systems added into this framework, so that we can really start leveraging what we built. And if you think about it, how it would be hard to sort of make some sort of UI contribution or back-end optimization contribution available to someone live. But in this environment, with a micro front end, you could put a small team together and build a micro front end and the back end supported API, get some buy-in for it, and in fact then get it live on someone's production box fairly easily if they are in fact using Financial Portal version 2 or the BizOps shell framework. So I would love to see some of that starting to happen, but to get there, we obviously need people from the community. And initially, you know, we've got lots of sort of expertise that would help. Is the ISC expertise, understanding business operations processes and the documentation, and then some UI UX sort of expertise, using that to help make our front ends look sexy. You know, it's always easier to sell a product that looks great, and certainly hoping to start seeing some beautiful front ends coming out of this work stream. But then also, obviously, we've got the back end functionality that needs to support all the processes that also need to be built. So that's where I see this going in the next PI, but it's really all up to us. So come join the work stream, and you can direct it in the direction that makes sense for you. And that's all I've got, Leslie. Leslie Ann.
That's awesome, Paul. So basically what you're asking for in your breakout room, if anybody wants to have a go at making a process using this new framework, they should really be in your work stream understanding what's going on.
Great.
That's the kind of thing you're after, right? And even if they're not here and they're watching this on record back, we'll find you a home if you want to go and find out how to make some UI change in your finance portal, but make sure that test for us that the APIs underlying it are actually fit for purpose for a process that you want to try and achieve. So that is awesome. Okay, super. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
The impact that we want to get is we want to make it easier and quicker for people to be able to run a hub and to run it safely and and that's a community effort, you know.
And my guess and my hope is that maybe as part of the Microsoft work and the IAC work, we'll end up with a fully fledged hub operational process, click buttons kind of thing over in the kind of sandbox world in that work, hopefully.
And I would love to see the sort of UI Basalt Framework deployed into Microloop as well, or
Miniloop.
Miniloop,
Yeah. So exactly that. This work stream will end up touching so many different projects and things that let's break the silos where we can, and let's try and join some dots, but and get some kind of structure together that makes that happen.
Yeah,
I'm really excited for that.
Great.
Okay, so Paul's saying come join him if you want to play with Finance Portal or the new APIs around the business process thing, and actually get involved in using this stuff so that it's not just one company in the community that has the knowledge around this stuff. So who is next on my list? I think it might be Michael. Yes. So Michael's going to cover several things because he's he's Superman. He manages multiple initiatives in parallel. His work stream will cover them all. So concentrate and realize that there's a few things going on here.
Okay, you seeing my screen?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. Okay, so first of all, we've got ISO 20022. We talked a bit about that yesterday, and the problem we want to solve is that we face adoption obstacles really because we don't support the ISO 20022 messages, which are already used by a lot of people. And although making an ISO 20022 version of Moduloop won't necessarily actually reduce the cost of implementing a Moduloop system, I think it will be generally perceived by potential implementers that it will. So, what do we plan to do in this PI? Well, our goals are, first of all, to make changes to the existing messages that we need to function in the normal payment space. And that covers, in particular, using unique identifiers instead of the numeric identifiers that ISO currently uses, and finding a way of incorporating the ILP signatures, which are a key part of the security of our transfers. So our plan is that we will work on first of all, proposing the changes, and second, getting them implemented by the ISO 20022 people. Second, we plan a switch-hosted ISO 20022 version of Moduloop for one implementation and for the P2P use case. So that's a relatively restricted implementation of the overall plan that we have. Third, we need, as I said yesterday, to look at extensions to ISO 20022 in areas where it doesn't currently cover the things that we need to have covered. And that is particularly directory lookups, authorizations, currency conversion, and third-party payment initiation, or at least the establishment of third-party payment initiation relationships between participants. We don't plan to actually get any of those achieved this PI, but what we do plan is to have a detailed write-up of how we would plan to do them, and something that we can take as a business justification to the ISO people saying, you need to cover this, and our proposal for doing it is like this. And finally, we plan a draft Moduloop market practice document, which will explain to an actual or potential implementer of an ISO 20022 version of Moduloop how to make a payment, what the participants need to do, what fields they need to fill in, fields they can't fill, and so on and so forth. Again, this will cover the funds transfer use case. So that's what we planned for this PI. We don't plan definitions of the candidate ISO 20022 messages that I talked about in point 3, and we don't plan a generalized version of the switch code. Now, those of you who've had contact with ISO 20022 messages will know that it's one thing to say I'm going to implement an ISO 20022 message, and quite another thing to say which ones I'm going to implement and how. So, as I say, we are going to concentrate on a single implementation that will need to be generalized, but that is not part of our plan for this PI. We would be very interested in having some business analysis skills to help us out here. And of course, the main risk that we have is we have an external dependency on the speed at which the ISO 20022 organization itself moves. We haven't yet joined, so we don't really have a clear idea yet of what sort of a risk that might be. But I'm guessing that they're not going to move quite as fast as we'd like them to, shall we say. So that's a risk. And our plan for success is, for the next convening, we want to have a demonstration of a modular loop switch processing a payment using ISO 20022 messages, and a document describing how to process a modular loop payment using ISO 20022 messages in a shared space so that people can look at it and review it. So that is our plan for ISO. Next up, currency conversion, or FX. So again, we don't currently, Moduloop itself doesn't support currency conversion, though the Mawali implementation does. There's significant customer pressure from existing and potential adopters to provide these functions, and we heard those of you who were in the hackathon discussion group yesterday afternoon will remember that it was one of the things Innocent was saying. A number of people said, how do we do this in Moduloop? So there's pressure from existing and potential adopters to do this. So our plan is then that when this is done, we will be able to support both retail, that is as part of a transfer, and wholesale currency conversions, and we will allow multiple organizations to offer these services in a single Moduloop scheme, which will make life easier for everybody, or at least that's the plan. So what do we plan here? First of all, API signatures to be approved by the CCB. This process already started in the last PI, but we will complete it in this PI. Second, the design for the code approved by the DA, and I should add in brackets, and the reference architecture team, because although we plan to implement it independently, should I say, of reference architecture implementation, obviously we want to implement it in a way that will slot right into our brand new architecture when we have it. Third, we expect code stories to be complete and the build started. And finally, we expect a testing toolkit implementation of a foreign exchange provider so that we can include currency conversion in sandboxes and in hackathons, and people can see it working. So we're not expecting to complete the build of the foreign exchange code in this PI. We would like, of course, to have business analysts and architects and developers to help on this. And we also think, I mean, this is something that Leslie Ann has emphasized, and rightly so, we need a clear business model for the potential foreign exchange providers to make it easy for them to understand what's in it for them if they provide these services. And our demonstration of success will be a demonstration of a Moduloop switch processing a payment with currency conversion, brackets, using simulators. Okay, so that's that. And finally, we didn't talk about this, but it's kind of an important thing that we're working on in the background. So settlement improvements. The problem at the moment is that the existing settlement mechanism doesn't really support the real world needs of implementers. And we also don't think it will really support the needs of the kinds of high throughput systems with many participants that Moduloop is designed to be. When it's done, our objective is to have a settlement function which supports rapid, safe settlement in high volume systems with many participants and where different types of transaction can be settled in different ways. We think this will improve functionality and ease of use for existing people. It'll reduce the cost of settlement for everybody, and it will allow different participants to settle in different ways, which we keep coming across in a number of the requirements that we have for particular types of people to join systems. For instance, foreign exchange providers, we discover very often want to settle in different ways from the way in which transfers that don't involve currency conversion want to settle. So we need to have a good standard way of managing all of that. Our plan for this PI, again, we want the API signatures to be approved by the Change Control Board. We want the code design to be approved by the DA. We want the code stories complete and a detailed business case for the new settlement model. Again, out of scope for this PI is a complete build of the new settlement code. We will expect to be coming back and asking for resources at the next convening. Again, we'd like business analysts, architects, and developers. And we, again, as with the currency conversion question, we need to improve and clarify the business justification for improved settlement. But we plan to show at the next convening a worked demonstration, notice the weasel words there, of the new modular loop settlement process. So the form in which this demonstration will be given remains to be seen. Now, I am going to be running one of the breakout rooms, and I'm very happy to use it to talk about ISO 20022 or currency conversion or settlement, or indeed anything else that anyone wants to talk about. So if you're interested in talking about anything at all that isn't covered by the existing breakout rooms, then come to my breakout room and we'll be happy to chat about it. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you, Michael. So you can hear, like, probably we're not doing any coding on this. It's all about kind of design readiness and all those kind of things. So it's discovery work stream activity to get towards a locked in design. But I would say any developer resource that gets involved earlier in this will really know how to hit the ground running.
Absolutely.
And we'll really understand the as is and the problem space and what we're trying to achieve. So even though we're not coding, get involved if you want to, so that you understand what's coming.
And I think we will be expecting to start coding on the currency conversion.
And
hoping to start.
Hopefully, yes. We still need to lock in the detailed stories and GitHub and all that kind of stuff. But yes, so please do go spend some time with Michael. My problem with this is that I want to go to everything. So I'm guessing that a lot of you will want to go to everything. So I'd also say in the chat what I said, don't worry if you can't go to everything, because workstream leads will accept contribution afterwards. And we'll get you back up to speed, because they are the lifeblood of the community. The workstreams really want to take people in and get some more community conversation going on these topics. So without further ado, next on my list is the infrastructure as code team. I'm not sure who's going to present, but there's 4 names here talking about what they want to talk about in their breakout room. I have Miguel, David, Tom, and Lewis as the 4 names, but I don't know who's jumping on stage.
Miguel, is that something that you can take over?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
You don't have to have a massive presentation, but just talk about what you want to talk about in the breakout room, what you want to achieve in the next quarter.
So basically, I think the main thing about version 14 is ensuring that we are aligned to the AIC platform. I think that's number 1. And also getting feedback from the community from their pain points with regard to using Helm and how we currently have the Helm set up for version 13, etc. So understanding that and helping us how to improve in version 14 would be great. And also, if there's any requirements that we're not aware of or or something along those lines that we can be made aware of and that can be communicated to us, I mean, it's possible that we can also accommodate that as well, or at least think of how we could potentially work with version 14 to put ourselves in a good place to accommodate that in future. So I think in a nutshell, that's more or less what that discussion is going to be about. I also think it also, I think, so David, if I think also it'll be vital for if you guys are interested in the AIC to also be part of that discussion as well. Since I think going forward, we'd like to standardize the AIC platform and have a common way and a recommended way on how to create platforms, sandboxes, POC environments, etc., as well as a basis for production deployment, etc., going forward. And I think that's the key aspect of the AIC platform that David has been working on. And obviously there needs to be a bit of reconciliation between what Lewis and Tom have been doing as well, since they've also got slightly different components that are doing similar things in some ways. So there's a bit of an overlap there as well. Yeah, I think that's about it in a nutshell. Sam, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Thanks, Miguel. So this captures only the modulo V14 side of things. Thanks, Miguel, for covering that. And then, as you said, we also want to merge or bring in the IA infrastructure as code IAC and some of the infra efforts that Tom is doing. And Tom is obviously already collaborating on the V14 as we discussed on day one. So we would like to continue that moving forward as well. So this, in the breakout session, we'll finalize this and include the rest of the goals as well. Sorry, Leslie, what do you?
So Sam, actually stay with me because I think what's happening is Miguel's off doing IAC breakouts, but we also have a breakout on your special subject of interest, the tooling that we have around the core and changes that you might want to make around that. So we got payment manager and TTK and all this kind of things. If you got some thoughts to do that in terms of your own breakout too.
Definitely. So we have the champions here, obviously, Vijay from the testing toolkit side and Yevon for payment manager. And I think one thing that I would like to actually communicate is this change in thinking that this is not about onboarding anymore, but more about participation, because these things are running continuously and are involved in every transfer, especially if we're talking about the payment manager. So that is the shift we want to recognize in this PI16 and moving forward. I put together some slides with what Vijay mentioned on day one and some other inputs about what the roadmap for testing toolkit looks like. And again, this is more about adoption and participation moving forward. So we've already started engaging with Mawali on using testing toolkit for validating the switch deployments, upgrades, and daily cron jobs. So that is one of our goals as well. One existing implementer adopting testing toolkit for validating the deployments. And there are some others as well. We can go into those in detail during the breakout session. The payment manager obviously has some cool features in the roadmap, standardization of the API and using it for PISP features. So Yevon will talk more about what we have in the pipeline. Thank you, Leslie.
Awesome. So I just wanted to say, if you've heard about this payment manager thing and you're curious about what it is and how you might put it to work in your business around Modulip, this is the work stream to join. If you're curious about how you can put TTK to work in your business, this is the work stream to join. I'm excited to see how we can build a roadmap around payment manager as a new open source component, similarly to finance portal in one of the other work streams. How do we build a roadmap around what we want to do next with these tools, how we're putting them to use to bring the stories to life and use the product team along the way where feasible to kind of help you tell those stories. I'd love to see a backlog that helps us shape, for example, how to change payment manager around ISO 222. And And these kind of initiatives, similarly, they all link to each other. So if you want to find out what is Payment Manager really, why do we want it, what's going on, these are the guys that know, and we'll do the demos and we'll get you involved so that you can see this is how I help a bank, a DFSP, get connected to Moali, get connected to whatever other switches, Myanmar switches and things that are out there in the world. It's going to be an awesome way for us to drive down the cost of getting started with Modulip, I think. Okay, that was our last pitch. And at this point, I think it's about handing back to Simeon.
Simeon, Leslie, and
yes.
Can
Go ahead,
you
Sam.
give me a minute to talk about the PISP updates? Actually, Louis was supposed to do that. I'm standing in front.
So we also have report backs happening later. I similarly am standing in for the merchant team. And Simeon, do you want us to do report backs for teams that aren't doing breakouts now or in the report back session?
I think let's do that in the report out section because we're coming up to the top of the hour.
Yeah. So just to say, guys, there are more things happening than what we currently talked about. What we did was pitch for what we're going to do in the next hour, which is have small group work where we kind of unpack this a bit further and talk about the details of how do we get this work actually done in the next quarter. So yeah, it's still happening. PISP and merchant.